We're in for a real treat again. With us this morning and also this afternoon is Dr. Rhonda Neal Waltman. Dr. Waltman is a highly respected, broadly experienced educator with over 34 years of experience. She has successfully served as a teacher, counselor, program coordinator, principal, central office supervisor, and assistant superintendent spanning grades pre-K through 12. As Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, she co-chaired the district's comprehensive strategic plan using the Baldrige criteria for performance excellence and developed a nationally recognized model for providing services to displaced students and families following Hurricane Katrina, including creation of a blueprint for addressing needs using a learning supports model. Following her retirement in 2006, she formed her own consulting firm, Neal Waltman and Associates, and currently she's a consultant with various nonprofit organizations, governmental agencies, and corporations. Her current areas of concentration include the following. She's a national project consultant for learning supports. That's with the UCLA Center for Mental Health in Schools and Scholastics Division of Community Affairs, the Education Trust's Transforming School Counseling Initiative, and Community School District co-owned strategic planning. She's provided evaluations for organizations with grants from the National Science Foundation and Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. Dr. Waltman currently works with the Alabama Department of Education senior staff in developing the framework for a comprehensive support system for all students. This work includes 10 initial districts' implementation of the Learning Supports Framework. She serves as an adjunct professor in educational leadership at the University of South Alabama, teaching data-driven instructional leadership and mentoring leadership. A native of Louisiana, and I do feel for her because she explained to me last night, this weekend is the LSU-Alabama game. She lives in Mobile, Alabama, and she's an LSU fan. So she's got a tough weekend ahead. But she resides with her family there on the Alabama Gulf Coast, both in Mobile and Orange Beach. Best of all, she is Mimi to 3 beautiful grandchildren, Mason, Madeline, and Sawyer. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Rhonda Neal Waltman.
Thank you, sweetie. Thanks. Well, good morning. How are y'all? You've had a break. We're going to get you out of here at least by 5 o'clock today, and all will be well with the world. No, you will be out of here long, long, long before then. Yeah, do feel for me because I have my LSU colors on, but my husband's an Alabama fan, and I've got to sit in that doggone stadium in Tuscaloosa, and I'm afraid it's just not going to be really pretty for the Tigers this weekend. I'm praying to all the football gods, but I don't, something in me tells me this is going to be a rough one, so just say a prayer for me. And then I hear all these rumors that Saban's headed to Texas, huh? He's a great, we had him at LSU. He's a great coach, but he's really a really fantastic coach, actually. And I can cheer for Alabama sometimes, but it's really hard. It's going to be an interesting weekend in the Waltman household. You know, who's a Roll Tide? Who the heck said that in this room? No, it's a great university. We've got, you know, I mean, we all live in the South. We just got football in our blood, you know. I've had an interesting morning this morning. I had to call Matt bright and early and tell him that my rental car was dead in the parking lot at the courtyard in Round Rock. But I want to tell you something about confidence in young people. The best thing that happened this morning, because I try to find a silver lining in everything, the young lady, the clerk at the courtyard, Caitlin was her name. I said, do you think there's any guy around here that might have some jumper cables? She said, oh, I got jumper cables. My daddy taught me how to do it. I thought, you know what? Come on, Caitlin, we're going to go out here and do this ourselves. And we did. Got it jumped off. There were 3 guys sitting in the restaurant part, and I had gone around to ask them if they had any jumper cables. No, I don't. And not one of them stood up like in the old days when a guy would say, come on, ma'am, let me go out here. We'll find some jumper cables and do it. So Caitlin led the way. She said, I just double-checked with my dad to make sure red goes to red and black goes to black. I was thinking, that's good, because I don't want to have to pay for this car at Thrifty Car Rental when I take it back. So anyway, it's been an interesting morning, so I'm so glad I got to hear Kent's presentation last night because I missed most of it this morning. fooling with the car. So, but anyway, I'm really glad to be here. I have been working with Matt and Linda Meggs for a number of months, doing a lot of planning around what we were going to do today. I want to give you a little bit of background so you understand, first of all, why my presentation is in two parts and how this is connected to you. School folks, raise your hands in here, loud and proud. Oh my goodness, I'm in the right audience here. If you're not a school person, I can assure you, you work with school personnel all day. We have tough jobs. We, in our business, we're sort of, pardon my French, we're sort of damned if you do and damned if you don't in our business sometimes. But here's what I know. Here's what I know. We reflect our communities every day in our schools, and we do a heck of a job in sometimes pretty tough situations. I know from my own life experiences in education, and as Matt said, everything from being a teacher to being an assistant superintendent pre-K-12, and the mother of a special education student. So that alone just puts you in a whole different ballgame. You know a lot. The reason that this is called Rebuilding for Learning is that that's exactly what we had to do. Katrina was a really, really bad hurricane. The worst I've ever been through. I did grow up in South Louisiana, so I was, you know, hurricanes are no big deal. When I go work in Minnesota, where Kent's from, and we were talking last night, you know, they have snow, but we have hurricanes. And it doesn't matter if it's a hurricane or a tornado or a flood or whatever it is. Disasters come and go. Our children and families are here. And we had to put some things in place. Thank goodness we had put these things in place before Katrina, because it did make rebuilding after Katrina better. So the first part today will be a lot around, so what is it that you really need to do when disasters strike? All I can say to you is don't wait for the disaster to get to know your own teams within your district or your community partners. You cannot wait for that. I'll tell you this, after my retirement, about 6 months or so after my retirement, I got a call from my lead social worker, and she said, Rhonda, you know those tornadoes that the tornado that just struck Enterprise, Alabama, tore up Enterprise High School, killed 8 children at the school. She said, I just feel this yearning that we need to go. They're our neighbors. You know, they're, what, 3 hours away. We got to go help them. I said, well, you know what, Barbara? That's exactly what you need to do. I said, you call me if you need to. We'll talk through some things. She said, I don't know what we're going to do when we get there, but we got to lend them a hand. She called me that night. She said, oh, my gosh, I didn't realize what we had. I said, what you talking about? She said, Rhonda, they sent us to this meeting that night, which was your typical meeting after disaster. School folks, mental health, justice was there, community agencies were there. She went to the school table. They were all at tables. She went to the school table, and she said, here we are, you know, and the ladies they were grateful that she was there, but she said, so what do you do now with your mental health partners, with your other partners? She said, we don't have any partnerships with them right now. And Barbara was just like, okay, well, we're going to be starting from scratch tonight. We will help you get to know them. Here's the moral of that story. You don't wait to after a crisis to get to know your major partners in school and in community. Please, whatever you do. Now, here's what I know, school folks. This community's not going to let us do that, because Williamson County is about partnerships. I don't know that I've ever worked with a place that gets that any better, because you have the right people at the table. The first part today will be our lessons learned from disaster, and quite frankly, guys, it may not be a hurricane here, but it could be something. So you want to be prepared. The second part, I'll give you a little stretch break in between. The second part will be a lot about the process and the framework we had in place that I think served us best, and according to the U.S. Department of Education, was what we did best in Mobile. And so that's why it'll be in two parts, and that's why but I do want to start with what is it that you really do need to have in place. So we'll start there, and preparation does matter. Hopefully today you will understand what you really need to have in place in terms of an infrastructure. And we used a pretty basic public health model to do our disaster planning. We couldn't have done it without our service providers. I would never have wanted to meet my partners post-Katrina when we were taking in so many students, and we'll talk about that. And I really want to spend some time today talking about what a real student support component looks like and what are the roles that we each play. Now, let me say this about Katrina. We had already just been through 2 hurricanes in Mobile. I forgot their names. They were like so minimal in comparison to Katrina, but I think it was Ivan and Dennis. I'll put it this way. Our FEMA team had just left and headed to Oklahoma for some tornado work when Katrina struck. We tried to get our same FEMA team to come back to us. Wow, we had 100 schools. They knew our schools already, right? It was a perfect relationship, but FEMA didn't let them come back. So, okay, that we had to start over with a new team. But just know this, we had already been through 2 when this happened. Just our schools alone, we had $30 million in property damage. All buildings received some kind of damage. We had 1,900 of our own students left homeless. Remember, coastal Alabama, you know, we're, as the birds fly, we are no distance at all from New Orleans. And if you know anything about hurricanes, the Northeast Quadrant is the worst. That's where we were. We were in the Northeast Quadrant, so all the water's coming in. How many of you have seen Forrest Gump? Remember that movie? Biola Battery is a real place. And Biola Battery had what the old folks call the 100-year flood. That's what happened in Katrina. We had schools with water up to here, okay? So it was a bad storm. So if all we had had to deal with was our own 1,900 students who were left homeless and our own employees who were left homeless and displaced, that would have been one thing. But we all know what happened post-Katrina. Texas and Alabama got them. You got the most in Texas. Thank God that you did, that your state stepped up, because seriously, I don't know what would have happened. The folks that had left New Orleans or who could get out, and those from Mississippi, we were the first city standing east of the storm, okay? So to come west of the storm, that's how Texas got the most. But we took in over 1,200 students who were displaced. Now, had we not had our act together, I can tell you right now, even with 100 schools, infusing 1,200 new students, that's a lot of new students. And let me tell you, the biggest problem was finding them. Because it was like doing, who's our special ed director? I know what special ed director, yes. It was like Child Find on steroids, because we were digging in every hotel, any place you could imagine, we were finding students. So, but in spite of that, we only missed 9 days of school. That's phenomenal. And I credit our facilities department and our maintenance department. And not only did we have a good student services plan in place, there was a facilities plan in place that said we had contractors on standby waiting to go in to fix our schools. Because you know what? You can't get kids back in school if you can't get the lights back on and you can't get some tarp on the roof. So, and we still had a few schools that were uninhabitable. So, you know, that was Portable City. That was split days between schools. It was, boy, you talk about creative scheduling, school folks, that was some creative scheduling. But here was our goal. Restore a sense of normalcy for children and families, okay? Listen, I'm a mother, and those of us who are parents in here know, when your whole world has been turned upside down, you've lost everything you've had. If you're from Louisiana or Mississippi, you're coming there with nothing but the clothes on your back for the most part. You're staying with folks you don't know, or you're staying in a shelter, or you're doubled up with a family or a friend. How can you even go find services when you're lugging your 3 or 4 kids with you? So a basic need for parents was to get the kids back in school. The kids needed to feel normal as they could, and parents needed them away from them so they could go get what they needed done. It was as simple as that, and that's what we were after. But we know this, schools reflect communities, And communities recover when schools recover. There's something to be said about when schools open in the fall and sort of things get back to normal. Normal is children being in school. And so that was honestly, that was one of our main goals. Now, as we reflected back, so what is it that we did? What is it that we had prepared for before the crisis, okay? We had a structure in place, and I'll show you a diagram of that. We clearly understood our roles among all the agencies. We knew what schools were supposed to do. We knew what we needed our buddies to do. Now, again, in a bad situation like Katrina, you know, again, we had to up the ante a little bit, but we had already been doing that with other storms that had come. So, again, we had that in place. Stress management, I'll talk about lessons learned. Boy, we didn't do a very good job with that one because, you know, we're save the world people. So we did the worst job with our own employees, to be honest with you. But here's what we did. And by the way, we really spent some time together as a team, community and school team, thinking about what we did well. Because the U.S. Department of Ed made us come and talk about it everywhere at all their meetings for about 2 years. So here's what we said. Let's do what everybody needs to do, what they do best. Now, that's a little phrase to remember. Because in a crisis, sometimes people try to do more than what is their best or something they're not adept at doing. And I'm going to give you an example of that. But stay focused on doing what you can do best that will make a difference. We were our ground rules were, do not diminish contributions that other people can make. Don't try to be, as my husband says, Mother Teresa. You know, you can't save the world yourself. It takes a team of people. So everybody tried to focus on what they could do best. I'm going to give you some examples. Avoid providing redundant services or interfering with what others were better able to do. For example, I knew the facilities guys knew how to get our schools back up and running. They had contractors lined up. I didn't mess in Tommy Sheffield's nest, and he didn't mess in mine. All I wanted to know is, Tommy, tell me when the next school's coming on. Let's go. That's what we did. I didn't mess in his nest. Clearly, mental health knows how to do mental health counseling. My role with mental health was to get them some extra, and I'll explain this, but to get them in the door of, we had a large Asian population. The Asian population didn't let folks that they didn't know in their front door to try to help them. So we had a plan for that. But everybody, we figured out what we each did best, and that's what we were about. And it's about avoiding redundancies. But we had already started working on fragmentation, redundancies, turf wars. We had started all that long before this storm happened, okay? So as a school district, we were about this: connect children and families with needed services in an efficient and effective manner, and promote academic success by removing barriers to learning for the children. And again, 1,900 of our own homeless, 1,200 friends and neighbors from Louisiana and Mississippi. A lot of kids in need, a lot of kids. All the more reason why you need a plan, because you can't do that kid by kid. You simply, it's too many. It's more than you can say grace over. You just can't do it. So here were our guiding principles. This is what we really used this information, really directed our work. Disaster psychology theory. We're going to go over just a little bit of that. It is what are the authorities, what are the research, what does it say about what do you do after disaster? That's what we try to follow as a community, not just as a district. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm going to remind us of that. Honestly, that was the first thing I asked my counseling supervisor. I said, Becky, go dig in a textbook. Couldn't get online. It was dark. We had no power. Go dig in a textbook and find me that triangle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We got to remind our principals we're going back to the basic needs here, okay? We're not worried about self-actualization. We're talking about kids that don't have clothes to wear, okay? Integrated learning supports component. I'll talk, that part 2 today will be a lot about that. Best practice model of case management. Here's what we did, guys, because I remember this. I remember talking to the head social worker, and I said, look, you got displaced families If I'm a mama, I'm come to Mobile for however I got here on a Greyhound bus, I'm here. I got 4 kids. Please do not make me deal with but one person. Doesn't matter if my kids are elementary, middle, high, doesn't matter. One person. So we chose to do it that way because that was what was best for families. So here's what we did. All titles were thrown out the door, wrote everybody's name down. If you were any position in student services, your name was written down, okay? In addition to that, some of our community partners, which I'll show you in a minute, said, okay, I'm going to loan you 6 people. So guess what we did? Wrote their name down too. As our schools started to identify the families, whoever was next in line took that family. And mental health we had just gone through some long-term recovery. They had what they called the Red Folder Project. Every family got a red folder. If there were 4 children in 4 different schools, it didn't matter. We tried not to do that, but if like I had a family, Jerome Woods was the principal. By the way, he came from New Orleans, swam out of New Orleans. He's a principal in Mobile to this day, so he's still my poster child for what we did right. Jerome and his family had nothing. Now he's a school principal. I had a folder for him, and everything his kids needed, anything the family needed, it was my job to make sure and connect them with that. If that meant driving them to go stand in the FEMA line, that's what we did. Now, and we did that just out of what did we think? It was survival for these families. Do you think they wanted to hear from 4 or 5 different people, like a different person from each school? No way. So if that's a blueprint, I just told you what we did. Wasn't anything fancy, but it was what was right for families. And the beauty was our agencies were right there. I mean, I didn't have to go across town. They were there. They sent reps to where we were working on this. And we asked 4 magic questions. I'm going to tell you about that. All right, so the disaster psychology theory. Any of us who have been through any kind of disaster know. You know, it's pre-disaster, it's the calm before the storm, it's the honeymoon phase as you get past the disaster, and then it's disillusionment. Let me tell you, our families jumped to disillusionment pretty fast. They didn't stay in a honeymoon stage very long. Disillusionment came maybe faster than normal, right? And let me say this, reconstruction was very difficult, because some of them never got to go home. There was nothing to go home to. So this is a typical look at disaster psychology, but I won't tell you, it was exacerbated. It looked a little more like this in a regular hurricane, if you will, post any regular hurricane, not Katrina, not at all. And I would say to you, our friends in New Jersey and New York after Sandy was much like Katrina, seriously. It was not an easy recovery. Now, any of us who know anything about recovery know it's. And by the way, you do have this on you do have this PowerPoint. This is hard to do, because how do you regain a sense of control when you've lost everything? Okay, how do you do that? If it was just a normal thing, then you know you're going back to your home. Eventually you're going back. But you talk about just take Jerome Woods, my principal example. How do you get life back to normal? You're worried about your school. You've lost everything. As your school is destroyed, your home is destroyed. And oh, by the way, the Orleans Parish School Board had not deposited their checks. He said, Rhonda, we went to. He got to Baton Rouge first. He said, I went to Walmart. We're just going to get some underwear and basic stuff to wear. You know how we have direct deposit? Deposit wasn't there. Wasn't there. So this regaining a sense of normalcy is really hard. For our children, though, resumption of age-appropriate roles and activities, think about the kids. They probably saw some things. No, I know they saw some things that we would never want our children to see, getting away from that storm. There's no telling what they saw. Well, you saw it on TV. It was horrible. They had to be put what I would call in a semi-adult role, and they weren't ready for it. And here's something else. You know our kids, you know how they get when their parents get upset, right? So not only are they being put in a different position, they're seeing their parents in a very vulnerable position. And parents feel that because, hey, I'm supposed to be able to take care of my family, but I can't, right? So it was one of those moments in my career that I will never forget, because it was extremely, extremely different than anything I had ever been through before. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a really tough old broad. But there were moments when I would go and shut my door in my office and cry like a baby. You know, because here, now, school folks will love this. It was one of those moments, all the regulations were out the window. It was wonderful. You know, it was like all bets were off, guys. If they didn't come with a birth certificate, so what? Guess what? How many of them had a birth certificate? I probably saw 2 mamas that had a birth certificate. But if they did, they wanted to. I kept saying, you know, you don't have to, if you don't have it, it's fine. The lady said, no, ma'am, I put it all in a Ziploc bag. And then I have tears in my eyes thinking, this lady remembered to get her child's birth certificate. Okay? But it was like all bets were off in schools. It was awesome. We could do whatever we want to do. Nobody cared. The federal government was like, whatever y'all have to do down there, we're going to send you some money, but y'all just do whatever you got to do. It was awesome. And we milked it for as long as we could because really, we did what was, all bets were off. Now, the scary part is we had a lot of special ed kids, and we had I repeat, no records. Did you get any students here? I'm telling you, they came with nothing. I will give Louisiana's Department of Education, I did a lot of work with them post-Katrina. They honestly had the best data system. They really did. When they finally got up and running, I was able to get some information from them. It was great. Mississippi, on the other hand, I'll tell you about them in a minute. I'm just like so over Mississippi with what they did. But it was seriously, you know how when you go to school you read about this stuff? It didn't mean as much until I had lived it. And our partnerships that we had with the University of South Alabama and our education friends there was awesome. They helped us remember that what we were doing was the right thing to do. It was what theory says you should do. But it was what a team of people, both inside and outside of the school district, knew we had to do for our families. So here's good old Maslow. And y'all know, here's where we were. Physiological needs, safety, feeling safe. Our kids had nightmares. You know they did. It was unbelievable. Belongingness and love needs, important. Esteem was important, but I'm telling y'all, it's like we couldn't get out of Tier 1 and Tier 2 right there. That's where we were. We had to take care of their basic needs. Remember now, a lot of these families were not generational poverty families used to getting a handout. Now, some of those daddies didn't want us to bring the Walmart card or the Target card. It's like, no, we'll handle ourselves. And the mamas would follow the social worker outside and go, please leave me the Walmart card. Because daddies were proud. They wanted to be able to provide, and they couldn't. They couldn't even access their money from a bank. So it was, I tell you what, it was something I never want to live through again. Never, ever. But we learned a lot. So Maslow was important. And for our principals, I swear, I had to go to some other place and print copies, but I held it up at the principals meeting. We had a principals meeting with no power. We went to one of our old schools that had lots of windows in it, so we could just see when I said, guys, this is what you're getting ready to have to deal with. And it was truly what they did have to deal with. And this is what we'll talk about in part 2. We had started our process within our district of training on a 3-component model of what you do to remove barriers to learning. Now, basically, in principal school, we learned to be good managers and instructional leaders. But nobody ever told us there were going to be kids with issues that had barriers, and we had to have a learning supports component. We didn't. So we'll talk about that in part 2. But we had put this in place before the storm, and it served us well with our partners. Now, so what did we do? We did intensive case management. Let me tell you one of the best things we did. We trained people. And I will give you an example. We not only trained our own staff and the staffs from organizations that were helping us, We dipped a little bit into Mississippi and took the coastal Mississippi school teams and trained them. One of our churches in Mobile had that, you know, it's like one of those mega churches, and it had a huge training room, like probably 4 times this size, okay? We just did it, well, our superintendent drove over to Mississippi and said, look, just send me some people on this day. We're going to try, we're going to have some people there to help you. What we did was we got psychologists from our community and our ed psych professors from South Alabama. We made a CD, I didn't, they made a CD for every teacher that was just a wealth of information, because kids need to express it when they get back in school. So there was things like that. Our State Department redid it, made copies, and sent it all across Alabama, because why? Going up I-65, that's, you know, kids, if they didn't stay in Mobile, the families went on up 65, wherever the Greyhound bus was taking them. So we did a lot of training, and people had that sense of urgency that they wanted to be trained in. They realized it was going to take all, you talk about take a village, it took more than a village to get through this. But one of the best things we did was training. Again, didn't meet our community partners after this crisis, but they were there to help us train. And again, we felt this responsibility to our neighbors as close as I think we went all the way past Gulfport and trained, you know, all the school districts along the coast. Now, this is the 4 magic questions, and I want to credit Dean Hayes from the College of Ed at South Alabama. He was a clinical psychologist by trade, but he's also the head, and still is the head of our College of Education. And this is what he kept bringing us back to reality, okay? And he said, as we decide who does what, because that's the thing, when a disaster strikes, everybody wants to do everything. Now, let me give you an example. True story. One of his professors, Phil Feldman, who just retired from the thing, he said, Richard, we've got to do something. Why don't we do a clothing drive? Think about how many people are in the College of Ed. We could do a clothing drive and take those clothes to Rhonda and they could give them out. And Richard said, now, Phil, that's a good idea, and somebody probably needs to do it. But who in town does that kind of stuff? Now, you know the people. Goodwill, name the people at the thrift stores, okay? There are people, there are organizations that do that. He said, we're a college of education. What do? We educate. We train. So he said, he got us, whatever staff was still in Mobile, you know, they hadn't gone off with the storm, said, what can we do? And that's how they started pulling this CD together. So think about it. If people do what they do best, and we all bring that to the table, it's sort of like having a potluck dinner. If everybody cooks what they cook best, we're going to have a pretty good meal. So that's what and I have never forgotten that story about the clothing drive. Is it a good idea to have a clothing drive? Well, yeah. Is it something we should do? We should do. Probably not if we're the College of Education. If not, refer it to the right one. So what did he tell Phil? Go call and make sure the people who do clothing in Mobile, that they are doing that. Well, of course they were, right? Is it something we can do? Well, technically they probably could do it, but they wouldn't be as effective as somebody who does that every day, right? Who has that logistics down pat. Is it something we can do well? He said, clearly, we will not be the best at a clothing drive. We don't have the racks. We don't have the site. We're not set up to do that. No more than Goodwill staff would have been appropriate to make the training CD. You see what I'm saying? So this, very basic questions, but I tell you what, he would round us back to these. If we were playing Mother Teresa and trying to do it all in the school district, he'd go, whoa, Rhonda, stop now. Okay, what can we do best? You got all these agencies wanting to help you. Let's just pick up the phone and call them. So this kept us real, if you will. This served us very well. Now, agencies, when a bad thing happens, tries to do the same thing. We try to agencies. Just think about all the people in the. If a disaster happened here, don't tell me Matt and the staff here wouldn't try to do more than they normally do, right? But here's the same kind of questions that agencies need to ask. What is it that we do best? What are the identified needs that we have? What needs do we anticipate? How can we do a real coordinated plan? How can we develop a plan of triage? Now, let me tell you what Justice did for me. It didn't take long for us to figure out we had some kids in school who had not come on the best of terms. They hadn't left their schools on the best of terms, right? Most of the time, I'm going to be honest with you, most of the time the parents said, well, he wasn't in school when we left. He had been suspended, or he was at juvie, or he was somewhere. What was beautiful is I picked up the phone and called my Matt and said, hey, buddy, send me a rep down here. The schools are sending me the names. I know we've got some kids that are having a, is there any way you can help, by contacting your cohorts where they came from? They did the best they could do. We didn't always know. And let me tell you, principals will tell you, that's a scary thing because you don't know who's walking through the door. They're coming with no records, nothing. But I'll be honest with you, we had very, very, very few problems from students. They were so traumatized and they were so happy to be in a safe place, we didn't have it. We didn't have it. Even kids that we knew something was awry where they came from, we really didn't. I promise you we didn't. But I had my juvenile team, that's what they did. They were used to tracking down, so that's what they helped us with. But remember this, guys, in a crisis, in a community where you're used to working together, keeping it organized is one of the hardest things because everybody's trying to do everything. And we just need to stick to what we do best. But you have to be coordinated and you got to be integrated about it. That's what I'm saying. Do not wait for a crisis to do that. Now, so this is, again, that disaster psychology theory. And let me tell you about this. We had more families needing level 3 than we had ever seen before, okay? Again, bad situation, super bad situation. Normally, after 3 days to 1 month, most of the time after a hurricane, we were pretty much done with it. But guess what? Not this one. It went on and on and on. So just know that the worse it is, the more you're going to need a longer plan, a longer term plan. So what did we do in level 1, those first few days? Like I said, we met, didn't have any electricity, but all my partners came together. We developed a shared vision. We talked about the 4 questions. That's when Richard introduced those to us. We figured out what our needs were. Well, the first need was just to find the kids. Just find the kids. Now, if they were, and by the way, most of them, once we got most of the families out of the shelters, they were in doubled up situations. Some of them lived in hotels for a long time, but some of them knew somebody or a family took them in. So we had a lot of doubled up situations. So what that meant was we had kids who would go to school with whoever they were living with in their zone. Finding the kids that weren't already in school was hard. All of our kids wore uniforms. A huge thing was making them feel normal. We got uniforms for all of them. We made them each a book bag. And we didn't do it. We had resources in the community. That's what we did. So every time a school got a child in, they faxed in a form, and they would ask their mama, "Do you have kids in other schools? Because you're only going to have to deal with one person." And that's how we did it. And this went on. Like I said, we should have been over in a few months. It was not over. Took a long time, but we kept that up. We kept that up. Anything that was a barrier. Remember I said all bets were off? Same thing was true for other agencies. You had a lot more, mental health had a lot more flexibility, public health had a lot more flexibility. Any of our agencies had a lot more federal flexibility, if you will. We took action. We were about action, okay? I will tell you this. It was a logistics, like somebody had to just totally handle the logistics. And let me assure you that was not me, okay? But it was a big thing. I'm talking tractor trailers of stuff would come in. I got to tell you my best one. You're going to think I'm lying. How much time I got? Okay, I'm about done. I got a call from the superintendent one day, who, by the way, he was a fireman before he became an educator. So, you know, he was like all over this disaster. He was in hog's heaven in terms of logistics. He called me and he said, Rhonda, can you please tell me why we have a tractor-trailer load of diapers at our door? And I said, nobody called me and offered diapers. I don't know why we have diapers. I said, but please do. I'm getting ready to turn them away. I'm going to send them to Biloxi. So I said, oh my God, don't do that, Dr. Dodge. Take the diapers. The food bank could use the diapers. They give out food. They give out diapers. We need a few for some of our serious sped kids, but the truth is, for God's sakes, keep the diapers. Somebody in Mobile can use it. We weren't best at distributing diapers, but I didn't want to let a whole truckload of diapers go when I knew we had mamas that had nothing. So the diaper story, to this day, the man has never forgotten, and he still blames me for ordering diapers, which I did not. But let me say this, guys. Here were some of our partners, okay? Our district attorney's office had a whole prevention arm called Helping Families. During normal times, we met every other week, and we did our own case management on our toughest kids in schools, okay? But then the social workers that worked with that, they just came and worked at the central office. So here were some of our existing partners, and look what happened, partnerships at work, and how we expanded this work as this crisis happened, okay? Justice, helping, there was our regular partners in the middle, but look how it increased, okay? Look how DHR is our child welfare. So we had partnerships that were phenomenal. And again, we tried very hard to stay true to our mission, whatever that mission was. But we just had a standing date. Like every other day, they came for lunch and we sat and talked about what do we need to do next, and we kept this process going. So here's what we did. We did the training. We had resources going back and forth. We did the disaster workshops. We did building and facilities disaster training. Now, I did not, but our facilities folks did. Now, this was one we did that DOE said they had not seen before. We had translators, right? We had our ELL translators in our district. The FEMA's Project Rebound, which was their long-term counselors that came in, they could not get some of the families to open their doors to let the help come in. But our families knew our ELL translators, right? Our bilingual translators. They knew them. So Miss Ang, for example, in the Bayou, Miss Ang could go up to anybody's door, which they weren't living in their houses, they were living in tents on their front lawn. Why? Because they didn't want to leave their house, because they were afraid somebody's going to steal anything they had left. But she could go to that tent and the mama would come out. The Project Rebound counselor could be there, and Miss Ang could say, it's okay, this lady really wants to help you. I'll stay here with you, and let's see what it is that you need. And what we did, we changed the hours that our ELL translators worked in the school day and let them go to work for FEMA in the afternoon. And so, and again, I didn't ask anybody's permission. I just said, look, y'all just work from whenever you can to whenever you have to stop and go to FEMA. Because here's what we know. Everybody was working over the hours they were supposed to anyway. But they were able to get those rebound counselors who were not from Mobile, they didn't know anybody, in the front door, get the foot in the door. And that was something, honestly, that they said worked really well. As the year went on, graduating seniors. How do you get them graduated? How do you know what? By that time, we were at least able to find out. Now, here's my Mississippi story, and I'm going to shut up about Mississippi. Louisiana let us give, they sent us their grad exam, or they said, forget our grad exam, give your own. If the kids do well, I'll send you their diploma. Mississippi said, no, we will not send you our grad exam, and because of test security. We're like, really? We do test security all the time here. No, but can you bring them on a bus back to us and we'll test them? No, we will not. You want trauma again? Let these folks have to ride through past Christianity and see nothing's left of where they used to live. Really, lady? Seriously? That's what happened. But let me say this to you. They got their diploma. They didn't want to send their diploma and didn't want to send the test. They took our test and they got their diploma. And even the ones not graduating, guess what they did? Even not graduating seniors, the others, they scored better on our state tests than some of our own kids did. So we did something right, instructionally and to support them. I really can tell you I felt good about that. So The Red Folder Project. Now let me tell you about social workers. My poor social workers were dying. They were so stressed, we didn't do a good job of taking care of the stress that they had. Like, I didn't get them enough massages, I can tell you that. I should have done better. But when it came time, as the families got better, and say they moved back home, which few of them did, or they moved somewhere else, or they got better, and it was time for us to give FEMA the cases that we had left from, 1,000 cases down to 100. The social workers didn't want to give up their families. I said, wait just a minute. You have been dying, and now FEMA's saying, okay, we're into long-term recovery. We can take it now. The social workers did not want to give up their cases. I said, now, guys, y'all can't have it both ways. You need a week off is what you need, but your families will be okay. You have gotten them to this point. So, we did not do well with our own staff. I'll remind you of that again. So we did a lot of things. We worked really hard. Resources began to dwindle, as often happens. Anger and disappointment happened among our families because they couldn't go back as quickly as they wanted to. Grief beyond grief. We did a lot of outreach to Mississippi because that was the place we were closest to. And we did some things really well. There it is. We had our removing barriers to theory that we used very well. We'll talk about in part 2. We had a good infrastructure in place. We had the right partners at the table. Health services was good. We identified hidden populations. Let me tell you about a hidden population. If the families had not originally come to Mobile, and let's say they ended up in Georgia, and then they came back to us, like they didn't stay in Georgia very long, but they ended up with some cousin in Mobile, we had to train our registrars in schools to count them. They were still a displaced family, even though we weren't their first stop. Because remember, the feds were sending per pupil money, per pupil, that we had to distribute. And public schools, let me tell you, we even had to distribute it to private schools. Can I tell you how many fly-by-night private schools we had around Mobile who were swearing, signing their name that they had a bunch of displaced kids in their school to get all kind of money? You talk about do a lot of legal work, it was unreal. The thing we did well, too, is we knew we couldn't do it by ourselves. Now, school folks in here, I'm going to talk bad about us for just a minute. Sometimes we close ranks, and we're like, no, we'll do it ourselves. We'll handle everything ourselves. Well, we can't. We cannot. On a good day, we can't do it by ourselves. So in a disaster, we can't do it by ourselves. So when you have a community like you have in Williamson County, guys, embrace it. Make it work for you in your district, but know when a disaster strikes, they'll be the first ones at your door to help you, and that's way, way important. And we did a lot of outreach creatively, like we partnered with a school in Chicago around, they sent every kid down the bayou a camera, no lie. No lie, rich district in Illinois. All the kids got cameras, they got to take pictures and write stories about their own experiences. The Chicago kids came down to meet them. The Johnson & Johnson took it on a worldwide tour around the United States of all they made a book, Eye of the Storm, of all their creative writing and their photography. And they got to go to Chicago. These are kids who had never been out of Biola Battery. They got to go to Chicago. It was phenomenal. I didn't go. I let my staff go because they needed it, but it was great. Nickelodeon, you have people come in. Some people come in for photo ops. These were not photo ops. These were people who really, and partners who really wanted to embrace this. So things we could have done better, keep reminding ourselves of the questions, care for our employees, and create reasonable expectations. We had a little bit too much Mother Teresa syndrome because we were trying to do it all ourselves and save the world, and we just could not. So. That's a glimpse of just some basic disaster recovery kind of information. Here's some great resources that you have. And I would ask you now, stand up and take a stretch break. Give us about 5 minutes, and we're going to switch things over. And we will get down to what it is that we did in schools to get us really ready to serve children. All right, I'm going to get started with part 2 because I got to get you out of here on time. And I want to be sure I do. So you recall that I said there were some things we had in place. In addition to the community partnerships, we had in our own district started using a model that was a framework for organizing learning supports that was developed by Drs. Edelman and Taylor from UCLA. We had our own principal and prospective principal training program in Mobile, and so one of my responsibilities, two big ones I taught school climate, how you improve school climate, and I taught using a learning supports model. So I wanted to give you just a little overview of learning supports, and again, this is not many slides because it's, and I may not even go over every slide, but I want you to know there was something different that we did inside of our school system that served us well. This theory has been around for a long time, but in the past probably really about 6 or 7 years, it's really, really taken off in school districts and state departments around the country. Kent, who spoke to you this morning, it's a small world because I am actually working in 2 districts in Minnesota, and he used to teach in one of them. So it was really interesting talking to him about that. But the theory is now lived out every day in districts, and it's a change of thinking, and it is an adult change. It's not about changing something with our kids. It's about changing how the support staff in a school district does its business. In a school, it changes how you talk about issues around learning support. So let me take you through a little bit of that. We are not going to get to all of this today, but I just want you to understand why this is important and what it looks like. Now, this quote is a very famous quote. I used to carry it around in my date book long before I knew about the work of Edelman and Taylor. But it was sort of like my mantra for how I had to defend what we do in school. Because those of us in the room get it, whether you're in schools or not, but Joe Public out there really doesn't understand why we have to deal with some of the issues we deal with in schools. Because, see, some people think, well, that's the parent's job. They're supposed to be doing that. Well, that may be true. But if it impacts learning, we have to address it. The trouble with school districts and schools is that we think we have to address it all by ourselves. We do not. That's why we have such wonderful community partners. Our biggest mistake is we don't know what to tell our community we need sometimes, because we don't know what we have and we don't know what's working in learning supports. We got it in instruction, but we haven't done such a good job in learning supports. So that's what this is about. The first thing is I want you to take less than 30 seconds and jot down, school folks, or even if you're not, you know what's happening in schools. What are some of the barriers that the children in your schools come with? Just jot down 2 or 3, and seriously, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. We would normally take longer, but because I've tried to split this presentation, I don't have as long to do this. So take just 30 seconds and jot down any barrier you can think of that your kids come with. Okay, let me get 2 people from each side to just shout out what's one of your barriers your kids come with. Start with this side. Abuse. Another one from this side? Poverty. Other side.
Substance abuse.
Substance abuse themselves. How about substance abuse of parents? Okay. What else?
No support at home.
No support at home.
Nutrition.
Nutrition.
Complex medical issues.
Complex medical issues.
Moral role models.
Oh, all right, and lack thereof, right? Okay. This is what Howard and Linda from UCLA did. One of the things they cataloged was they did, I call it the all-call email, where they go, hey, send me all the barriers from their listserv, which they have thousands of people on. And they cataloged the barriers into 4 columns. See if these look familiar to you. Starting at the left, neighborhood, family, school and peers, and individual. Now, let me say clearly, so the neighborhood can be an asset. Families can be an asset. Schools definitely can be an asset. But we don't need to fool ourselves to think they could also be barriers there. Okay? So when they catalog these, and you just look at the columns, what's an aha that comes to you in looking at these columns? Just the headers. We deal with every one of them. And the public doesn't know we do, that's for sure. They don't, do they really understand what we deal with? And only 1/4 of those are individual to the child. 1 column out of 4. So you see why, school folks, we cannot do this by ourselves? We can't. But we have to deal with these issues. So we have to approach it systematically, just like we do instruction, okay? Now, here's the truth. Because of some of these barriers, kids can't read. And if they get really deep and get further and further behind, not only do they have these issues, then they have academic issues that sort of exacerbate their problems. And let's look at that. Here's what I call the range of learners slide. Now, you see this child right here? He is reaching for the stars. He's motivated. He's ready to learn. He comes in school. He doesn't have a lot of barriers. The teacher can teach. They can give enrichment activities, and boom, the child learns. That's what we want. That's why we have school. What do you think is the percentage of students that come ready and able to do that? 2 out of 10. So that's what? 20%. Anybody else want to venture? In your schools, what do you think? And there's nothing you can tell me that I haven't heard before. I have heard as low as 5% and as high as 70%. Whatever your percentage, let me assure you, in colleges of education, and I teach in one, we don't do a good job preparing our let's just say 50% of them aren't motivated. We're training our sweet little teachers to teach this kid. And who shows up at his or her door? No wonder we lose. I forgot the percentage of teachers that we lose in the first 5 years. They're like, I'm out of here. Y'all ever talk to some of those young teachers? They had this disillusion. That's why we have mentoring for teachers. It's like, because somebody has to go, baby, don't leave. I swear it's going to get better. We're going to help you. But because they're like, who are these people? I wasn't trained to teach these. So you see, we have a missing link. We got to do something about it. Now here's the reality of what really happens. Kids have barriers. We have to put in a learning supports component that addresses whatever was on that other slide. We have to re-engage them in learning and ask the JPOs in here, is it easier to engage or re-engage kids who have gotten in trouble legally and back into school? Because some of the kids will tell you, please don't send me back to that school. Please, can I just stay here forever? Because I had a bad experience. You ever had the teacher that said, and don't send him back to my room? Those of us who have been a principal has had the teacher march down to your office and go, you see, he's not coming back in my room. And I'm like, oh, yeah, he is, sweetie. He's going to come back. Because guess what? You're the only one teaching the subject he's teaching. He needs. Yeah, you're going to take him back. Now, deep inside, do I want to put him back in that class? No. But re-engaging is a heck of a lot harder than engaging them the first time. But this little section right here has to happen to get these outcomes. What we want is we don't ever want them to drop their book bag and end up here. That's the kid that just starts falling behind. He's our best chance of improvement. But what actually happens, no matter what the issues are, some of them fall to here. Special ed director can tell you. When they fall to here, see, he didn't just drop his book bag. He sat down, he said, I ain't going to pick it up. Now, he may not say it, but his actions show it. So if you're the teacher and this is the range of learners that walks in your door, you understand why teachers can't do this alone? They simply cannot do it by themselves. That's why in districts, about 25 to 30% of our budget is in support positions. Now, who might that be? A counselor, a nurse, a social worker, an attendance officer, special ed inclusion sometimes, grad coaches, ELL. We could lump a whole lot of positions under there, okay? But the bottom line is that's about 25 to 30% of budgets. That's a lot of money. So if people don't get this as a moral imperative to do something different because it's what's best for our kids, then it has to be an economic imperative. Because the feds are not sending more money. Ask who handles any kind of budget in here from a central office. You got a budget? I had a budget, and guess what? Every year it got slashed less and less and less. okay? So you got to do more with the people you have. They're not giving you a bunch more people. And in schools, our biggest resource are our people. When they say cut, when the state says, oh, you got to cut your budgets, we can't send you more money, you got to cut it. We don't have enough stuff to cut. Ask your financial officer. It's always personnel because about 85% of the total budget is people. So you see why you have to touch people to cut a budget, but whoever you have is who you're going to have. My superintendent said, don't even ask me for it. Don't turn in another position for him. It's not going to happen. You got to work with what you got. So the people that are in support positions have to work differently. And let me show you what I mean. Okay? If we do this right, these are the kinds of results that we should get. Okay? And I clicked way too fast, so let me go back. If we get a comprehensive system of learning supports in place, and we're not doing random acts of support, you should see some of these things improve. And let me give you an example of a district that did this, which, by the way, is one of the most diverse districts in Georgia. And here's Gainesville City. This is their results. They're northeast of Atlanta. Grad rate jumped. More students exceeding expectations on their state, academically exceeding expectations. Look at this, I call them the frequent flyers of absences. Percent of students missing more than 10 days decreased from 15% of their entire student population to 5%. Disciplinary tribunals decreased by 27%. What do I mean by that? When a kid gets long-term suspended or recommended for expulsion, they have a hearing. That's in every state. That's part of due process. But there, they just call it a tribunal. To decrease those by 25%, that makes juvenile happy. That means they're not, some of them aren't ending up with them. Their family and community engagement increased tremendously. Their scores on their school climate surveys from the state increased so much that, I'm not kidding you, the State Department called them and said, can we come see what you're doing? And in school business, that's code for we think you're cheating. Your scores went up so much you had to be doing, were you like filling them out for parents? No, we were not. This is what we did. We changed how we stopped doing random acts of support, and we got a system in place. We got our act together just like instruction has their act together. Now, any of us in the business will tell you, we do a lot of stuff now, and it looks just this messy. When I was a principal, I had 99% of my students, 800 students, 99% on free and reduced lunch. Every bit of this was happening at my school, and I'm going to be honest with you, I was a naive first-year principal. If that was me in the middle right there, I couldn't even, for 3 months, have told you all the people coming and going in my school doing services for my kids. I was clueless. And I had been a school counselor. I knew it was a lot of stuff, but I couldn't even get my arms around how much was happening in my school. So I knew I needed to look at something different. I did not know the term learning supports. I knew family support, so I started with a family support team because I didn't know what else to call it. But I got the people at the table who were in support positions. The nurse, the counselor, all those people. I had 2 community partners who were super. Boys and Girls Club, and the police department had a precinct in my neighborhood. Imagine that. It was like the highest crime area in the whole city, right? That's who were my community partners. Oh, and a minister, because all my ministers came together to help me. So that was my family support team. Later on, fast forward, I would have now known it was a learning supports team, but I didn't even know that. I just knew we had to tackle problems differently because we could not keep doing random acts of good. Now let me tell you my other names for this. This is my messy closet slide. That's what I call it because it's a messy closet. I call it whack-a-mole. Y'all remember that game at the fair? Some of y'all are way too young. But my daughter tells me that they have it at Chuck E. Cheese. So if you're young, you may even recall it from Chuck E. Cheese. But you know how the mole pops up and you whack, whack, whack? Okay, that's how this feels. Because what we do in schools, and sometimes the only thing we know to ask our community to do is the same thing, and that is if you see a kid with a problem, you fix it for that kid. Oh, then the next kid has a problem, then the next kid has a problem. And we wear ourselves out doing it kid by kid. Okay? That's what we have to stop. Because we can't keep doing it that way. It's too many of them. We're being outnumbered. There's too many kids that need help. There's not enough of us. And the budget officer says he ain't giving you any more money to hire more people. So we got to do our work differently, okay? And it can't be marginalized and sit outside of school improvement anymore. It's not an afterthought. It has to be at the table when you talk about big issues in your schools. Now, this is how we operate, so I call it sometimes the firefighter mentality. And as I told the team last night, listen, I had a lady in Minnesota tell me last week, she said, or the week before, she said, I have a thing about firemen, a little plaque in my office, and it says, act like a fireman. And I was like, yeah, that's what this is about. She said, no, listen. It goes on to say a fireman spends 10% of his time fighting fires and 90% doing what? Preventing. And I was like, oh, I need that plaque, because that's exactly what this is about. We can't keep, there's not enough firemen if we did all of our work by just fighting fires. That's what we got to stop, okay? So, what do I mean by learning supports? Guys, that's anything we do in school to have equity among students, okay? Whatever you have to do to have equity. Now, equity does not mean equal, okay? Here's the synopsis of equity. Equity is, I get what I need and you get what you need to both get to the same place. And equity does not guarantee success. Equity, if you are equitable, you are guaranteeing opportunity and support. Okay? Take an AP class, for example. If you're trying to get more kids into rigorous studies, that's the instructional side of the house, you can't just throw every kid in the whole school in AP and not give them support. How many of you deal with high schools in here? Suggestion, go back and do this. Look at who's enrolled. First of all, get the demographics of your high school. Then go back and look at who is enrolled in AP classes. And you tell me if it reflects the demographics of your school. And I'm going to tell you it doesn't. If it does, please email me. Because we eliminate a lot of students for more rigorous classes, because if you do most of your recommendation based on teacher recommendation, teachers miss some kids. But if you look at a body of work on students, you will pick up some kids that you say to the kid, look, I'm going to put you in there because I know you can do it. How many of us have told kids that? You can do it, and I'm going to get you support. Ms. Cross is going to do, if it's AP Calculus, she's going to tutor you. I promise you I'm going to give you support, but I want you to do it. You know when you tell a kid, I know you can, and I'm giving you that chance, it's code for your teacher didn't recommend you, but I want to be sure you get in there, okay? If you do that, that you're equalizing the playing field. You're allowing more children access. Access is half the battle for equity, okay? If you have kids that come to school and they have not been exposed to some of the things that you think kids should be exposed to be prepared to go to kindergarten, you got to give it to them. But you got to support them through it. That's equity. Equity, remember, equity does not guarantee success. It guarantees opportunity for success with support. And you got to be systematic about it. That's what this is about, okay? So in principal school, this is what we train principals to be. Managers, any principals in here, or former principals? It's okay to admit you've been a principal. We are a rare breed. It's not so many of us want to be principals anymore. Have you noticed that? It's sort of scary, isn't it? Have we scared them all away? You got to be a manager. They teach us that, right? Got to keep the bookkeeping right. Got to do all that. You got to be an instructional leader. Now, I remember learning that. And the thing that's not there is our messy slide. We have to bring it to the center. Learning supports was our messy slide. We got to bring it to the center, guys. It's got to be, if you think about it, if you're the superintendent, this is your school improvement table. This is your leadership team sitting here. If you're a principal, it's right here. You got to be talking, and you got to have representation from all three of those circles. It can't. What cannot happen is our messy slide can't be sitting out of school improvement, because it's the thing that stops school improvement when we have too many kids with too many issues. So what Howard and Linda did is they said, look, let's think about what it takes when kids have issues and barriers. What do? Well, we do some things along a continuum. Now, this is not the UCLA continuum. This is a public health model of continuum. If you've ever been a school counselor, this looks familiar. If you're a nurse, this looks familiar. If you're in any type of support, you understand a tiered intervention, right? In schools, now we use RTI, based on the same thing. Have you used PBIS, which is the Positive Behavior Plan? It's built on a continuum, okay? And it starts with prevention. What did the lady tell me about the fireman? He spends 90% of his time here, okay? So in school and in communities, we do a lot around prevention. You got a lot of that going on in Williamson County, okay? If that is not successful and children start to slip, we have an early intervention. Remember the kid that dropped his book bag? If that starts, we got some things we put in place. The kid starts missing a lot of days, we kick in with that dropout prevention person or the grad coach, or we got to have something in place, right? In the community, that's what we have family support for. That's what we have after-school tutoring for if they're not doing well in calculus. We tutor them after school. So early intervention, catching it early, okay? Then if that doesn't work and they keep falling, think of it like a colander, they keep falling through, that's the deep end kid. That's the system of care. And this is what I hear schools say and I hear community agencies say. The red circle is bulging. Ask the special ed director. More kids being identified are deeper in kids. You understand? This is designed on purpose to be bigger at the top. Because prevention for all kids should be bigger. We should be, listen, that's what they send your superintendent money to do, by the way. What one superintendent said, your per pupil, the money you receive from the state is about, and local taxes, about $6,200 per child. So let's just play at $6,200. Do you think you're educating this kid down here for $6,200? Oh, no, you're not. That's a $50,000 child. Because you have to kick in all the extra services that you have to give this child. Now, you start adding up percentage of time of people's salaries, and y'all, I'm telling you, this is an expensive child at the bottom. So you understand, even if you don't believe this is the right thing to do for kids, economically, we got to look at things differently because this is bulging at the bottom. We don't have enough people in support positions to make this work. But people in support positions will tell you by the end of the day they're exhausted. They may have only worked with 10 kids or 10 families, but they are whipped down like a limp dish rag because they are wrung out. But I'll tell you what, if you're a nurse or a social worker or a position where you wait for referrals, you're booked up. If you're the school psychologist that's testing kids, you're booked up by October. You ever try to get a kid tested when the blog is full? You understand why that's the waiting to fail model? We cannot do our work like that anymore. We cannot. Now, I'm not a Pollyanna, so I'm not living in the world that we're never going to have kids that need deep end services. Of course we will, but the goal is to have fewer. Many more kids in the green circle. And our actions have to be in the green circle. Now, the other thing that Howard and Linda did, so they said, okay, if we're going to get our messy slide together, we got to figure out what is it we do for all, for some, and for a few. That's a continuum. And then they built, I call it, they built shelves in my messy closet, okay? So imagine, ladies, we're going to finally convince our husbands to clean out a closet, and we're going to redo the closet this weekend. We're going to go to Home Depot, okay? That's a standing joke in my house because we have some messy closets that he won't go with me to Home Depot to get the little shelves for yet, but we're going to get there. As soon as this game is over, we're going to get there. So we have to take everything on our messy slide, and we got to get it organized because we have to start talking about it in an organized way. It can't just be these random acts of support. So the first shelf, and by the way, Howard and Linda also cataloged, so you got a lot of barriers. Tell us this, schools across the country, what do you do for all these barriers? What ends up on your messy slide? So they took over 300 different interventions that people do when kids are having barriers to learning, and they cataloged them, and then they sort of chunked them into 6 big areas. Now let's look at these areas. And by the way, this is what we're going to concentrate on after lunch, okay? The first area they said is classroom-based approaches. That's educators in here. That's Tier 1 of RTI, okay? What happens in the classroom? Well, teachers teaching, or sometimes other people go in and help the teacher. It could be an inclusion teacher, like a collaborative teacher. It could be the school counselor going in to do whole group on how to be nice. You know, it's somebody from the community coming in and teaching why you don't want to bully people. Whatever it is, it's inside of the classroom. That's the most important shelf on the closet, because that's why we have school. The next shelf is transitions. Now think about transitions that our kids have. There are normal transitions. Home to daycare, daycare to school, elementary to middle to high, to the world of work, transitioning in and out of juvenile. Hurricane Katrina kids transitioning from having a home and a school to not having a home and having to be in a new school. Okay, you see what I'm saying? Lots of transitions in a child's life. In one community last week, no daycare in the entire community. None, zero. You think those kindergarten teachers are going to catch you know what when those kids get there? Because they will not have the prerequisite skills. Okay? And I don't care if it's generational poverty that we're dealing with or situational poverty. Now, y'all hear me. Situational poverty is getting more severe now than ever, because parents that were living paycheck to paycheck, you let one of them, let's say they have 3 part-time jobs between the parents. Let them lose a part-time job. Let them lose insurance. Your kids that used to could afford to pay for field trips or pay for to be on the cheerleader squad or pay for band or pay for... Watch it. We see them clearly not having the money they even had last year. So hear me. Situational poverty is one you need to remind your schools about, because it is real right now, very real right now, okay? Daddy may have had a really good job at the plant, and now all of a sudden he's having to work in a job way beneath his skill level, okay? So this is an important one. And kids are in transition. I had a principal tell me last week, you're right. He said, you're right, because I had a mama come in and tell me, we don't have a car anymore. They repossessed it. So we don't have transportation. So we're living with my sister and her kids. That's a transition. Another big area, home and family engagement. Now, Dr. Karen Mapp's work from Harvard is some of the best I've seen. She has a book, and I'm not going to say the title right. It takes more than a cupcake sale. I think that's the name of her book. She talks about this is not just involving parents by come bake some cupcakes, okay? Engaging families in learning, that's what Gainesville did very well. That's why their scores went up so much. They found a way to identify with their parents, over half of which they come directly from Mexico, directly. So this one is an important one. And you've got some community agencies who are willing to help you with that if we know what we need them to help us with. Community engagement. Listen, Williamson County, y'all earned some kind of gold star for that. You got more engagement than you can say grace over. But schools, we are not good partners if we can't tell them what we really need. And most of the time we can't tell our agencies what we need because we don't know what we have. We got a messy closet. So part of this is cleaning your closet up so you know what it is you need. Crisis assistance and prevention. That was part of my disaster work. But it's also where school-wide discipline plans live. It's why you have school safety plans. Somebody's got to work on that. Okay? Lots of things can live in crisis. We'll talk about on that shelf. We'll talk about that. Now, finally, this is where we live now. Student and family interventions. Our random acts of support, child by child, family by family, that's this. Now, we did some of that post-Katrina. We did deal family by family. But we had a system in place before we did it. Tier 2 and Tier 3 of RTI, that's there. But that leaves you 4 other areas that we need to build prevention around. And right now, honestly, in most of our schools, we don't have a good plan. We don't have really good shelves in our closet. We just do all this stuff. We forget, 3 years ago we might have had a good program, but that person that used to run that left, so we don't use that anymore, and we don't know what we have. But in reading and math, we can tell you what we've got in our schools. Instruction has their house together. We do not. We got a real messy, messy house. So one of the things that we do when we work with districts is we help you map what you have. And I think I stuck a picture in here. This is as simple as it gets, guys. When we do mapping, we take the 6 areas, our 6 shelves, and we say across the continuum, prevention, early intervention, or deep end, what is it that we do? Now, this is a student support leader in a school district in Louisiana. This is what, hear me well, this is what she thinks her schools are using. Look how many things are on there. Coming out of one department at a school board. Really? And she was the first to tell, she was like, oh my God. Because when they mapped, when her schools mapped, did she see all those things show up on her school's map like we're using what you're offering? You see what happens? We keep adding to our messy closet, but we don't even know from a district level who's using that. So part of the analysis we do is we let the schools map, and then we do that little overlay. And what central office staff figures out is, we're not even using that. They're not even using that particular program anymore, or that particular approach, or that agency that used to come in, oh, they only go to 2 of our elementaries and do this. Well, if it's such a good program, maybe they need to go to all your elementaries and do it. See the equity? Let me tell you what good principals do, and maverick principals do. We just go out there and find whatever it is we need for our school. And sometimes we get it from a central office staff, and sometimes we don't. We may have the best answers in the local school, but the district knows nothing about it. So it works both ways. But when you see a slide like this, let me see if I stuck one more in there. Maybe I did. Yes, this is Minnesota. Okay, this is classroom-based. This is the curriculum side of the house. Look how many things, and I can't even read what they say, but it's a lot of sticky notes. Look what they say is coming out of curriculum. That's for instruction. No wonder the teachers are going crazy. You see what happens? So from a district level, one of the first things that we say is, we don't want to work with your schools until the district's willing to clean up their closet. And superintendents love it because they get to figure out what's working, what's not. And I'll tell you the story I told some of the ladies outside a while ago, and I'm not lying when I tell you this. When we did this in Mobile, curriculum people didn't even want to do it with us. I think they were afraid of what theirs was going to look like. But I got the federal programs lady to do it too. I did all student services, then we did federal programs. Come to find out, she had a program, she had a lady, a coordinator making big bucks. She coordinated something in safe and drug-free schools, so she had these federal dollars, right? We had 21 middle schools. She was working with 3 of them. Now let me get this straight. You drawing, I don't know how much a year, plus benefits, and you working with 3 schools? No wonder the lady, and my friend said, I never knew what the heck she was doing all day. Well, she wasn't doing much if it was 3 out of 21. So when Samantha said, I tell you what you're going to do, sweetie, you're going to start doing that. If it's such a good program, you're going to do it with all 21 schools. The lady retired. And I'm not making that up. I'm telling you, that's the truth. That's what happens. Because there's really probably enough staff, but we are busy, but we're busy doing random acts. We got to get our act together. Because see, if we can get our act together, then wherever we have gaps, we can say, okay, community agencies, this is what we need you to do. But right now, our communities come to us, our agencies say, look, we can do this, this, and this. Well, that's all good, but maybe that's really not even what we need. But we can't tell our agency friends what we need. Because we don't know what we got. We don't know if, is every middle school getting it? Every elementary? Don't know. So this is an important process, and I'm going to tell you what, it was painful, but it was very good. Once we did this before Katrina. So you understand why I knew then I was lean and green. I knew what I had, and I knew what my partners could do. That's where you